Good morning, guys, and welcome back to Cyber Talk with me, Julia Lee, Senior Manager of Ontario's Education Centre of Excellence, and your host for today. We're kicking things off today with the start of Cybersecurity Awareness Month to discuss everything on how to increase cyber resilience. Today, I'm very excited to introduce to you our super panel. Excited to host Carolyn, who's the General Manager of IT Services at Thames Valley District School Board. We have David Hayes, who is the Head of Cybersecurity Operations at the Ontario Government, as well as Wissa, a Senior Manager of the Cyber Risk Advisory. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so David, I know that understanding your background, you started off as a co-op in the Ontario Public Service in your journey. If you can just let us know about your cybersecurity journey and what this means to you.
Sure. So for me personally, I had just received a 3-year diploma in computer systems and networking and was working part-time as a system admin for a medium-sized organization. And I was looking to further my education to set me apart from what I felt was a fairly competitive marketplace for system and network admins at the time. So I just set up an open source web filter and secure remote access solution at my part-time job and found those aspects enjoyable. And there were a few schools in Ontario offering postgraduate programs in cybersecurity, and I thought that the cybersecurity education would give me an edge in job opportunities. It wasn't until after I got into the course and started to learn more about cybersecurity that I became interested in a role in which security was the focus. And I was especially interested in the Security Operations Center analyst role, which involves monitoring for, detecting, and responding to cyber threats. And that's where I got my start.
Excellent. Thanks, David. I know, Carolyn, you've got a bit of a non-traditional background in terms of your career in cybersecurity. If you could just share in terms of how you got here and what really interested you in the cybersecurity industry.
Yeah, thanks for that, Julia. And certainly my background has been a bit more diverse than others. I actually started as a professional urban planner. And after finishing my graduate degree, had my sights on being a watershed planner and working at a conservation authority. And how I got into IT and cybersecurity, my transition was really through geographic information systems. Started working with that. Then I got recruited at a municipality. And I've had the privilege of leading an IT department for the last 13 years. And through my roles and responsibilities in heading up information technologies for public sector, certainly cybersecurity has been really at the forefront of a lot of the roles and responsibilities that I've had over the years. So it's been a great journey, and I've learned a lot from a lot of great people, and continuing to learn as I continue in my career.
That's great. Is there anything that you found surprising when you entered cybersecurity there, Carolyn?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned quite quickly is how changing and complex the field can be. We've got a lot of hackers and folks that are doing a lot of work in seeing how they can enter into organizations, networks, or individuals' account credentials, and really the manner in which they're doing that, it continues to evolve and change. And I've certainly noticed it has been hard to keep up, but I think the one observation I've certainly had is that even though things are changing, I think we're all really focused on trying to stay up so that we all have a resilient and safe environment to work from for all folks.
Great. Over to you, Sam. Sam was actually the person who spoke to me first about cybersecurity and why I should consider a career in cybersecurity. If you can share with our audience today in terms of some key insights of your former self about entering cybersecurity, so maybe some tips or areas to explore, what would those be?
Interesting. So a bit of my background regarding that question is I came from, after a comp sci degree over 20 years ago and 15 or so years in solution development, I had the opportunity to come into cybersecurity, and I came in from a very non-traditional kind of channel, which is the way that cybersecurity engages with its clients, right? Because I normally came in with the experience of marrying basically the technical with the business area, and we thought, hey, I think there's an opportunity for cyber to basically better align its services to the business. And I jumped at the opportunity before cyber really became such a huge thing, because it was 2015 before that marquee year of 2016. So if it's one piece of advice I can share is there's a lot of transferable skills. We sometimes don't think about it because we think of cyber as a very strong technical field with very specific technical area, but you'll find there's a lot of transferable skills from various other areas in the I&IT world that you can bring into cyber, and that will help not just you, but will probably help enhance cyber and the cyber risk posture of an entire organization when you bring in those non-cyber skills.
That's right. Excellent. All right, so moving on, just to talk a little bit more about specifically the 24 Cybersecurity Operations Center that David leads here. What are some resources within the Ontario government to really address cyber resiliency?
Yeah, so my branch is responsible for the 24/7 monitoring and cyber incident response, ethical hacking, vulnerability management, and secure solution design and configuration advice. So more specifically, we're the branch that keeps an eye on OPS networks and systems. We respond to cyber threats. We assess software vulnerabilities and provide remediation advice. We simulate attacks against Ontario public service assets and teach information technology teams how to plug those holes that we find. We provide enterprise security solutions to address identified risks, and we assist clusters and ministries with security solution design advice to address their cyber risks. And these activities help ensure our information assets are as secure as we can make them. And when issues do occur, we're ready to respond any day, anytime.
I really like that. We can respond any day, anytime. And that's definitely the spirit of the cybersecurity team here at Ontario. Thanks for that. Sam, can you just share about what you are leading in your area in terms of building cyber resiliency?
Sure. So my unit is the Cyber Risk Advisory Unit. Previously, it's been known by other names, such as a Threat Risk Assessment Unit. And what we try to do is have David's team respond less. So in a lot of ways, that's why we're groups, and some organizations will consider us a part of the first line of defense, and by other names, security by design. And it's really how do we advise initiatives, whether they're new initiatives, existing initiatives that are undergoing major transformations, enhancements and such, to build with security by design in mind, thereby to reduce the potential opportunity for cyber incidents to happen. And so the team I lead is solely made up basically out of risk analysts that embed and provide advice to various areas of government, sometimes broader public sector, other agencies, and so on. And at the end of the day, that advice goes into securely designing whatever it is that you're doing, but ultimately also is rolled up into a formal industry standard risk assessment so that the decision makers are fully aware of what are the risks that are basically being accepted and what is the residual risk associated with that initiative that they're undertaking.
That's great. Talking about initiatives here, I know, Carolyn, you've got a ton of initiatives under your belt, just not being, managing the school boards, but also in your role of being an expert panel member in the Ontario government. So what are some initiatives on your side in your day-to-day work that you're doing to build that cyber resilience?
Yeah, sure. First thing, I'm just going to acknowledge that I think historically, cybersecurity was always considered an IT issue or an IT problem that they had to solve. And certainly, I think we're all acknowledging that it's more than that. It is a business matter, a business problem, and a business opportunity. So at my board, like many boards in the province of Ontario, we've actually incorporated cybersecurity risks right into our board's risk management plan. Which is incredible, and it really gives it that, focus from a larger organizational perspective rather than just an IT department perspective. We've also developed business continuity plans, a disaster recovery plan, and also have a crisis management response plan in place. So I think the preparedness piece is pretty important, and that's certainly something that we at my school board have focused on. We also have been doing a lot of work around education and training as it relates to, cybersecurity, safety, privacy, and security with our staff and students. There's certainly going to be more work to do in that area, but we are trying to approach this really from a kind of an ecosystem approach or ecosystem perspective, so that we are trying to address this, from many areas or many facets, so that we are helping to really build the digital citizenship of our staff and students that we serve. But I think what we're doing in school boards, I know there are lots of other organizations that are doing something similar. And obviously, we've got some great partnerships with the province through the Cybersecurity Division, and certainly the Ministry of Education has been incredibly supportive for school boards in Ontario.
Great. Just wanted to maybe open up for our audience today to understand how we're connecting the dots. So from the government to various sectors such as the school boards, what's kind of top of mind?
Top of mind for me is shaping my branch to be able to better support our changing work environment, such as increasing telework and the ever greater adoption of cloud computing, which are two major trends that we're seeing. And I'm especially interested in helping to support partners and stakeholders in improving their cybersecurity posture to deal with those changes. And also, a very large percentage of cyber attacks start from phishing messages. So legitimate looking message is received, an attachment is opened, or a link is clicked, and this results in a compromise of the user's endpoint, which can lead to a greater compromise that stretches beyond the endpoint and causes a much greater impact to an organization's information assets. So by knowing what to look for in phishing messages, by not clicking those links or opening those attachments, a large percentage of attacks are stopped in their tracks. Educating the user base around threats of phishing messages, implementing controls to sandbox attachments, and scanning links are some of the best ways to limit the threat of phishing messages. And we use all those methods at the Government of Ontario. Another big piece of advice I'll give here is to use multi-factor authentication wherever it is supported. In the Government of Ontario, we utilize multi-factor authentication quite heavily because simple username and password type authentication is no longer sufficient.
That's right. So we've got quite a robust phishing program here on itself, and maybe let's just hone in on that here in terms of how we're supporting, especially the broader public sector, on their phishing campaigns, especially when we've been seeing quite an increase ever since we started working remotely. All right, so David, did you want us to just share maybe some of your thoughts in terms of how we're rolling that out? I know we've got our monthly community or practice calls there, but in efforts of just maybe rolling out on the phishing campaigns there, how would you see us rolling that out kind of effectively for various sectors?
So when it comes to phishing, I think education's key. So we definitely want to make sure that we're giving our broader public sector partners the tools and resources that we have around common phishing campaigns, as well as the best pieces of advice that we can give to protect themselves. So like I mentioned before, attachment scanning, link sandboxing, like these are two key pieces. And just making sure that they understand what targets they are and that they're telling their user base to be very mindful of the links they're getting, reminding them that, phishing messages can come in any form. They can look very legitimate. They need to watch out for the domain names associated with the senders of the messages. Is that person within their domain? Is it spoofing? Hover their mouse over links inside of messages to see if that link is actually pointing to a website that that they would be familiar with, that they would be visiting. So those are some of the things that we educate them on.
Fantastic. Carolyn, I think you were going to add in something there. Over to you.
Yeah, I was actually just going to take a little different slant. I guess what's top of mind for me, and I'm sure everybody's heard the term "it takes a village." And in my opinion, that really conceptualizes the focus that we all have to have around cyber resiliency, regardless of what organization you're in. Certainly from a school board perspective, there is the role of a school board in ensuring staff and students are properly trained and empowered, right? And quite frankly, accountable for their online activities. We have a lot of tools in place. David mentioned a lot of great ones, multi-factor authentication, strong password policies, passphrases, and just making sure, right, even the education of accessing Wi-Fi networks. These are all incremental components, really kind of this larger approach, that all organizations need to take. I'd also add that certainly at a school board, there is a role for family and guardians to also play in this, to really support their children with, practicing safe online activity behaviors. And certainly for those in younger years, they're going to need a little bit more support, and it will take time, because I'm certainly sure we all have appreciated the amount of online experience many of our students have had, right, over the past school year, due to, the shutdown of the schools as a result of COVID-19. There also is a tremendous role for vendors in this space. They are developing software, providing apps for all of us to use. And I personally feel that there is a responsibility up there in as well to make sure that their applications are secure. They're not collecting private information that they don't need to have. And they're making sure that their systems are fully protected so they can't be breached. So, coupled with that, we've got a lot of organizations and agencies that are supporting, and we really need to, in my opinion, take a lens of diversity and inclusion as we work through this. This is not just a problem, as I said, for technical people to solve. We all have empowerment, we all have accountability, and we all need to make sure that we need to help each other through this. We can talk quite easily about some of these concepts, but then you try to have that conversation, right? Maybe with a different culture, newcomer to Canada, what have you, different age groups, and the conversation needs to change. We need to make sure that we're constantly tailoring how we talk about this, so that we've got the right type of uptake and understanding. Again, just so that we can uplift and help each other to uplift all of our cyber resiliency. So I think that's my biggest piece right now is getting us all to work together a lot more, not just in the broader public sector, but really across all industries, so that we can all properly engage in this and just keep each other safe.
That's right.
I wanted to add something, if just quickly to that, and regarding top of mind, it's interesting some of the topics that we've discussed here. One of the key things that a lot of these controls that we're talking about kind of come back to is something we're seeing more of, which is seamless cybersecurity. To me, that's kind of one of the key things, and by that I mean, accessibility and usability are key factors in anything we roll out today, whether it's from the public sector, whether it's from the private sector. And if you make cybersecurity onerous, it will be avoided, whether it's by your solution development teams and so on, or by your end users. So one of the critical things that we're seeing is, how do you ensure you still have that due diligence and you have the right controls into place, but they're not getting in the way and they're not looked upon as a chore by both the people creating your application and the people using your application, for an example. So that's something that myself and David also have been dealing with in the last, I would say, over the last year and a bit or so, which is, we still want to be as secure as ever. We just don't want to be spending a lot of time, whether extra time developing solutions or for the users putting them through, a lot of loops just so in the name of security, while we can have smarter ways to do so. And as Carolyn pointed out, the vendors are really driving here in terms of some of the leading edge things that we're seeing to be able to accomplish that.
For sure. And I think it's more important than ever that we all work together, just to Carolyn's point and what you said there, Sam, in terms of the line of cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. We hear that all the time, but I think it's more important than ever, especially in the current world that we're in now. But I think in terms of today's discussion, we've seen knowledge of operations, understanding the vulnerabilities and remedies are usually the starting point for building cyber resilience in an organization. So at this point, is there any kind of steps that you want to share with the viewers today on how they can build resilience at their organization?
Well, I'll start. Start small. Don't get overwhelmed. This is an incredibly overwhelming area, and and there can be some online sources that might not be as authoritative as they should be in this area. So focus in on the provincial and federal websites. They've got a lot of great information that can support you. David mentioned multi-factor authentication. That is key, as well as strong passwords. And then just building up that awareness in the campaign to mitigate phishing campaigns, right? So we don't have people that are unintentionally clicking on links that they shouldn't be clicking and sharing credentials that they shouldn't be sharing. It's almost like you have to, when you do anything, right? Just give yourself that little bit of pause of, okay, what am I doing here? Does this still make sense? And don't just assume that everything that you're accessing, every account you're creating is safe and secure. There is a little bit of a piece of due diligence that you can undertake. Most of the applications and websites, they all have privacy documents that you can have a look at. I know they can be a little bit wordy, but it doesn't hurt to just do a quick little scan of that. So just encourage everyone to, just do a little bit more questioning than you might normally have. And as I said, practicing strong passwords and multi-factor authentication whenever and wherever it's offered is a good thing. So hopefully that will help our listeners.
Yeah, I'd add a little. Sorry, Julia. I'd add a little bit on password using unique passwords for different websites. So use a password manager is definitely some good advice, because password managers will help you enforce password strength and unique passwords for each one of your websites, and they're very safe and convenient to use.
Yeah, I was going to say, in spirit of Cybersecurity Awareness Month today and how we're kicking things off, definitely something for us to really focus in on, and in terms of making sure that we apply the MFA and all those tips and resources that I know the province has rolled out on cybersecurity.ontario.ca with all that advice on that side. Sam, anything to add on here on your side in your day-to-day work in terms of any kind of topics that are top of mind, and how we can advise viewers today on how they can build up resilience?
Yeah, I think, given that it's Cyber Awareness Month, a high level awareness goes a long way. And by that, I don't mean to just kind of repeat the word of the month, but the common language that you get out of a high level awareness really helps people have a better discussion around cybersecurity. So there are lots of good short videos out there available, whether it's on YouTube or other avenues, that will help you understand things like what's a business owner, right? Even something as simple as multi-factor authentication, what's good, what's not. And just having high-level concepts. We're not talking 2-hour videos to kind of dive into some very technical field, but having a good understanding of that high-level terminology like risk or a vulnerability, or a business owner, or a data custodian and stuff, allows you to at least have some high-level discussions using the same language to avoid kind of confusion. And then I find that's the first step in then determining what you actually need to dive down and dig into. For example, if you're going to determine whether you do have an area of concern around authentication, then you should know what authentication is versus authorization. If you're going to realize that maybe I'm not doing risk assessments, or I don't have a proper proactive defense, I should, probably figure out what proactive defense is. So that sort of very high level awareness of concepts, and there's many great videos out there to get people talking in the same language, even if they're not cyber experts, I think are key to get you down the right road for cyber resilience.
Julie, I just have one other thing that I just thought about that might be interesting to share is, often I think many of us see posts either on Instagram or Facebook or any social media site where they ask, everybody share your favorite dog's name or your dog's name or all of this. And those are all, right, opportunities for people to get at really what could be your password information. A lot of people will simply use, right, what was the last street you lived on, what's your hometown, and just a little call or watch out for all of the folks here to just be mindful of that, and may not be the best thing to participate in, given that often those are being requested for a very intentional and malicious reason.
For sure, and I see all of us here smiling and nodding. I'm sure our viewers too are nodding, so thumbs up if you can relate to that in the comment section. And I see some of you guys have added in your questions. We'll get to that in a moment during our Q&A session later today. But maybe we'll move on to a little bit more about your participation on the expert panel there, Carolyn, in terms of your role. What does it mean to be a member of the expert panel?
Well, it's been a real privilege. I'm quite honored to be asked to participate this as a representative from the K-12 sector. I am right now chairing a subcommittee. So what we've done is we are working on the preparation of recommendations for a final report from the expert panel. And there are 4 subcommittees that have been developed. I'll just quickly run them off. One is called Oversight and Operating Model. So we're looking at, are there ways that we can approach cybersecurity in the broader public sector from an operational perspective? There's another one working on communications and stakeholders. We've got another one looking at shared services and resources. And the one that I'm chairing is on education and training. So specifically, my group is looking at what opportunities we have to ensure that we've got appropriate education and training materials available for all public sector stakeholders and users. We're also looking at higher ed. We know that there is a shortage of cybersecurity professionals, and we're looking at what opportunities we have through colleges, universities, and maybe private sector organizations to help ensure we've got an ongoing group of students that have been trained in both the hard and soft skills, so the technical and the interpersonal skills that really do need to round out cybersecurity professionals. We are also looking at opportunities in the school board, the kindergarten to grade 12 sector, to see how we can better support our students. One thing that I've been a strong advocate of is really making sure that we are supporting our teachers and our students and seeing if there's an opportunity to embed cybersecurity training right in the K-12 curriculum. That, in my opinion, would be pretty great, pretty amazing for the province to look at. So that's just an area that we're investigating. And then we're also coming across, any programs, tabletop exercises, not just kind of formal training sessions that we hope will really help to lift everyone up in their access to the appropriate tools and responses should they experience a cybersecurity incident. So lots of really exciting things going on. As I said, I'm working with an amazing group of professionals on the panel, and looking forward to hopefully sharing at some point the recommendations, down the road.
That's great. David, in your role, I know you're dealing with cyber incidents on a constant basis there. So maybe you can give us maybe a glimpse of your day-to-day role and maybe some tools that we're using outside of the tools that Carolyn has talked about in terms of tabletop exercises is really effective in terms of launching out the simulations to bring people together.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, I'm the director that's in charge of the cybersecurity operations branch. So we do one of our biggest things is the 24/7 365 cybersecurity operations center. So we centrally monitor a bunch of security tools through that unit that feed into what we call a security information event management system. So that pops up use cases which our team investigates. So we use EDR and endpoint protection tools, web gateway tools, security information event management systems to discover security incidents, to dig in, to see what's legitimate, what's a false positive, provide the response and advice to OPS stakeholders and other stakeholders when threats are discovered.
Great. And Sam, on your side here, when you're doing the risk assessments, any kind of tools that you suggest, or anything on your side that you're seeing a trend in?
Yeah, I mean, so from tool suggestion, I would say to stick to something simple that helps you take a threat model driven approach. And what I mean is be very clear so that you have a realistic risk assessment rather than a highly theoretical one that's throwing the book and burdening whether it's yourself or clients with a large amount of controls. Have a realistic view into what threats you see may happen and find a very tangible and straightforward method by which you can articulate those threats and the controls against them. And there's quite a few things out there that are open source, whether it's available under NIST or under other industry standard methodology. There are some that you pay minimally for, such as ISF and IRAM2 as well. All those are really great methods by which you can have a formal approach that helps the analyst or your team of analysts think about what possible threats and risks I have to deal with and how do I mitigate them. But yeah, that would be it from that sort of tool approach.
Definitely, it's just really about definitely top of mind of driving down the risks there. But moving on in terms of kicking off Cyber Month again, bringing you back to the table, I'm hearing the province is launching their second cybersecurity conference on building cyber resiliency and protecting Ontario's broader public sector. If we could just hear a little bit more about that in terms of your involvement there, Carolyn.
Yeah, thanks for that, Julia. I'm really pleased to announce that we've got several members of the expert panel that will be participating in the Cyber Resilience Hour. So really looking forward to that opportunity, and I'm sure everyone will learn lots from the various speakers of those sessions. So that'll be fantastic, and I'm certainly going to be participating in much of the conference. It's very exciting, and hoping to continue to learn on this journey.
That's right. Yeah, it's definitely a great partnership that we see here between the province. We've got CyberX at the table, and as well as with the Ryerson University's Catalyst team putting together this conference on this side. All right, so at this point, I see it's time now for our Q&A session, and I'll open it up for you guys to ask any questions you have to our guest speakers today in the chat box. All right, I see first question up today is, what are the top 5 key takeaways for a cyber team to keep in mind to build cyber resilience? Maybe this one, I'll kick things off with David Hayes, if you want to help answer this one.
Sure, thanks, Julia. So determining the goals of your cyber program. So what are you looking to achieve? Are you part of a larger cyber unit where responsibility is divided amongst different teams? Or is there just one IT group that's also responsible for security? Understanding your assets, so identifying your organization's crown jewels. Assessing your cyber risks, ideally continually. So what are you vulnerable to? Are you running just a Windows environment, a mixed environment with Linux servers, etc.? Developing a layered defense, including a mix of education, awareness, and technical controls to address risk. So this could include security policies, processes, including a cyber incident response process, education campaigns, patch management program, cyber insurance, cyber incident response retainer, endpoint protection software, multi-factor authentication, et cetera. And lastly, testing controls. So this could include simulating a cyber incident and your response to it, phishing campaigns to test your organization's susceptibility, et cetera.
All right, thanks, David. Thanks for all the quick 5 tips there for our viewers today. Carolyn and Sam, anything to add on in terms of how one can ensure that they strengthen their cyber resilience at their organization, or top things to keep in mind?
I think David provided a great summary. I think the only thing I would just add on is just the ongoing effort to keep educating, creating awareness, trying to keep it really simple for people to be successful in a really great cyber resilient environment. I think there's lots of little things that folks can do that we've already shared when we responded to some other questions, but I think David had a great summary there. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Carolyn. Second question here. It looks like a question targeted towards you there, Carolyn. Very interested in engaging with the expert panel. How do we contact them?
Oh, great question. Thanks for that. We have a website that's been set up that folks can access. It's at cybersecurity.ontario.ca, and you can connect with expert panels there. Better yet, tour this conference platform. We have an opportunity to, you can connect with expert panel members through our groups page. So either of those two venues, we welcome any reach outs, questions, concerns, feedback that you'd like to share. Thank you.
Great. I see a lot of the questions rolling in now. What is their perspective on how they can help small business recover from a breach? Is cyber insurance the only option?
I can take that one, Julie, if you'd like.
All right.
So there are companies which specialize in providing cyber incident response, and they can be engaged quickly in emergencies, so you're not on your own. We also have an advice and guidance service for broader public sector through cyberadvice@ontario.ca, and we also encourage reporting to your local police jurisdiction.
All right, great. Our next question, as we're going through the list here, what would you say is the role of community engagement when fostering cyber resilience? That's quite an interesting question there.
I would say the role of the community engagement piece is try to share at least indicators of compromise with law enforcement, with provincial partners, so through cyberadvice@ontario.ca, with the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, because when there's knowledge of what's happened and indicators that can be shared with the community, it really prevents attackers from being able to reuse the same infrastructure to attack others. It basically makes their life more difficult. So having the community kind of work together in responding to these types of things really makes the attacker's life more difficult and reduces the risk of compromise for everyone.
I think the only thing else that I would add to that is from a community engagement perspective, take some time to share with members in your agencies, your community groups, and any users that you interact with to talk about cyber safety, protection, resiliency, and incorporate that. There's a space for these cyber talks really in all facets of everything that we do, because technology is so infusive in everything that we do, and there's so much available that we all access online. So I would just recommend take the time to incorporate that so that you're helping to uplift the education of your membership as well.
That's great. And yeah, just to maybe reiterate David's point of, the Ontario government, the Centre of Excellence, we do host a monthly community practice call just for that intent of fostering cyber resilience and sharing best practices with one another and how we can help each other out as a team. All right, just moving on to our next question. If there's nothing else to add from our panel members, is there any funding pool that SMBs can tap into to conduct pen tests or penetration tests and routine assessments? I think I might know the answer to that one, but maybe David, if you could confirm, or maybe where we stand at this point.
Yeah, not at present, no.
So in terms of that, is there, in terms of updates on that side there, David, is there anything that the viewers can connect in with us to find out more information?
Yeah, we have a mail inbox for broader public sector engagement, cyberadvice@ontario.ca. So if you don't get a chance to ask your question today, you can always follow up through that mailbox and we can answer it there. And for updates on this question specifically as well, you can also fire it there and we can reply.
That's great. And I know that the Operations Center is 24/7, and I think that general inbox is as well, David. Is that right?
That one's 9 to 5. That's monitored by the threat intel team specifically.
All right. So I guess for folks out there who would like to connect in with cyberadvice@ontario.ca, you'll probably get a response back next business day. But moving on to our next question now, how can threat intelligence feeds be made more accessible and actionable to non-tech folks?
I can maybe answer the part around more accessible. So there are some open source feeds available. It also depends on the threat intelligence feed you're looking at. So if it's a feed that just includes known indicators of compromise, so IP addresses, targeted ports, stuff like that, known threat actor groups and what they typically look for. Alien Vault had one at one point that was free. I think they got a paid version of it now, but they do have a free option, or at least they did. We also provide an alert advisory service through that email inbox that I mentioned, so cyberadvice@ontario.ca, as well as future integration with our malware information sharing platform. And we do some monitoring for the province in general on groups that are targeting specific sectors, and then that's when we're releasing the alert advisory pieces to the members of our community of practice.
I think just further to tag on to that one, certainly from an expert panel perspective, we are looking into what opportunities we have to improve really all folks' access to intelligent threat intelligence feeds, alerts, and this is one thing that we've noticed is that on the panel that there are a lot of sources for this information, and sometimes it's challenging to understand where to go. Certainly, as David had mentioned, there's lots coming through from the province. We also know that the federal government also supports some feeds as well. So we're looking to see how we can bring that all together and maybe try to get a little bit more centralized, one-stop shop approach, so that it'll just become a lot more easily facilitated for any individuals to access this information.
Excellent. All right. Next question is quite interesting. Really depends on where we work in cybersecurity, but what does a typical day look like for those working in cybersecurity? On my side here on the education team, probably a day looks very different from Carolyn's team or Sam or David's team, where we're checking in on all inquiries and all of our general inboxes, especially as we're kicking off Cybersecurity Awareness Month today, to roll out any education materials, events planning for the broader public sector, as well as our target for Ontario Public Service staff, which I think we have close to about 70,000 staff. So very different, but happy to hear your perspective, and maybe I'll pass it around the table. It's kicking things off maybe with Sam there, if you'd like to share how a typical day in cybersecurity looks like for you.
Sure, thanks, Julia. So my team, which consists of basically cyber risk advisory resources, which are resources that provide security by design advice and do threat risk assessments. Their typical day is usually working solo with, whether it's a ministry partner, cluster partner, or even in some cases a BPS partner, to provide advice on how to design something with security in mind, identifying the risks for them, and providing advice on mitigating those risks, and then ultimately rolling that up into a final report for the decision makers to sign off on that residual level of risk. So the day could vary depending on where they are in that life cycle. They typically do 10 or 12 of these a year, and basically they could start by kickoff meetings that they could have where they're introducing themselves, they're talking about the scope of the project, they're getting to understand what it is our clients are doing, or they could be knee deep in research, trying to figure out, okay, now that I have a good understanding of the project, let me look at what's happening in the industry. What are some of the threats, the vulnerabilities, new things that we're seeing around the technology, or the really exciting part at the end where they're writing up the report with the different risk levels according to industry standards to basically provide an executive summary as, here's the good work we've done, here's a residual risk we've chosen to accept, and here's the sign-off requirements at that level.
Great, definitely different days there. Maybe over to you, Carolyn.
Sure, thanks for that. I'd echo what Sam was saying. Certainly every day can look a little bit different, but certainly at my board, like many school boards, we have advanced threat protection tools in place, as well as vulnerability scanning tools. So I've got a great group of staff on my team, and they are reviewing alerts that they receive every day, checking them out, confirming if we've got any situations that we have to address. So that's pretty much a standard, but then certainly we get inquiries and reach outs from staff and students, and that adds a little bit more variability between our days. But for the most part, we're keeping pretty busy, and I think because a lot of the hackers are doing things differently, it causes and creates a lot of changes for all of us to make sure that we are maintaining resiliency as best as we can.
That's great. Over to you, David.
Sure, thanks. So my team's responsible for monitoring and incident response, threat intelligence gathering, vulnerability management, penetration testing, and solution design and configuration advice in response to identified cyber risks, as well as deploying and configuring enterprise security controls. So depending on which unit you're part of in there, your day could vary quite a bit. So for the monitoring and incident response side, our security analysts are working with our security information and event management tool and our EDR tools looking for cyber threats. On the vulnerability management side, we've got a team that operates our vulnerability management software, produces the reports around vulnerability management, and prioritizes risks for application stakeholders to address. We also do the penetration testing pieces. So before services and servers are greened, so deployed to production, we're conducting extensive quote unquote hacks against our own systems in an effort to identify holes that we need to plug through, configuration changes and code changes and whatnot. On the solution design and configuration advice side, often in response to threat risk assessments that Sam's team performs, this team takes those risks and works with the business areas to come up with solutions and configuration changes to address those identified risks. So that's a lot of working with those partners and understanding the technology and how best to configure it securely, as well as adding additional technology potentially to the stack to address it.
That's awesome. And thanks for sharing, giving a sneak peek of a day in your life in cybersecurity here. I can see some interesting topics coming up on our show on Let's Talk Cyber, and how do we dispel these myths in cybersecurity, whether it's through our day-to-day lives or kind of general practices. But up next is what has changed in multi-factor authentication practices in the remote world, if anything has changed since then. What are you guys finding on your side there, Sam, when you're conducting your risk assessments?
Thanks, Julia. It's a very interesting and on-point question, given what we've been seeing recently. So, I would say a couple of years ago it was just do multi-factor and get some multi-factor options going. And then, as time's gone by, we've seen threat actors mature, and therefore we've seen our need for different multi-factor authentication options mature. So they've obviously, what that means is they've gotten more robust. We've had to move away from some of the more easier, even though they still exist out there. Depending on how sensitive it is, the information you're working with, we've had to recommend stronger ones, which is, maybe use an authenticator versus getting a code in your email or getting an SMS text. Those are still sufficient in some cases, but they're no longer just viewed as good enough for everything. So, as I think there was a CRTC article recently that showed thousands of, I think it was over 20,000 SIM swaps are possibly carried out. SIM swap compromises are carried out in almost a yearly basis or so. So you're seeing, and you will continue to see, as threats mature, a move towards more robust and stronger multi-factor authentication methods. I think David may want to add to. He's got some good examples. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, so when it comes to multi-factor authentication, what we've seen historically was it sort of started with SMS messages. And as Sam spoke to that recent article about the SIM swap vulnerabilities, so if someone is able to take over your SIM card or your phone number, basically take over your phone number, and they can start getting their SMS alerts, it really makes that particular method much less secure. So we're starting to see a shift more towards app-based multi-factor authentication. So if you've used the Google Authenticator on your phone and it pops up a code that you've got to put in, or a little alert pop up, that's much harder to circumvent. The other thing with multi-factor authentication is there needs to be education processes around it, so people know that if an alert is generated on my phone, and I didn't do any specific action, then that's, someone has my password potentially, and that's why the alert was generated. So they need to ignore that alert or report that their credentials may have been compromised.
Great.
Sorry, Julie. I was just going to take on, the only other thing I was just going to add is that I think with the growing number of services that are now supporting multi-factor authentication, I certainly have been observing a greater uplift of more people engaging it, whereas perhaps in the past you wouldn't have seen it as much, or maybe just technical or folks that have privileged access. But now I'm seeing a lot greater adoption across the general public, which is a good news story to keep again improving everyone's kind of cybersecurity and awareness. So I think that's a positive step in the right direction. And certainly as the tools become a lot more sophisticated, I think that'll just continue to enhance everything that we're doing and making sure it's safe and secure.
Great. On this topic here, there has been an uptick of ransomware incidents lately, as we know, and are there any recommended best practices to follow that might help prevent a ransomware incident?
Yeah, I can take that one, Julia. So when it comes to preparing for ransomware, there's a few kind of big things to keep in mind. So one is limiting the exposure of your public-facing devices. So don't have systems with remote desktop protocol turned on that are internet facing, especially those that have single-factor authentication. Attackers can exploit those in minutes, and it's definitely something that we've observed. Another one would be just be mindful of attachments and emails. So attackers will attach malicious ransomware executables or infected Word documents with malicious scripts into attachments. Those will get downloaded and executed by users. So just be mindful of your attachment policies. It's a good idea to have a service that scans email links and attachments and include a sandbox piece as well. So I know if you're an Office 365 user, that's their advanced threat protection and safe link services that do those things. The other one to be mindful of is again multi-factor authentication. So if you've got public-facing accounts, you need to have a public-facing system or application. It should be protected with multi-factor authentication. And lastly, scanning your perimeter. You just want to make sure that you don't have easily exploitable public-facing devices with vulnerabilities that are trivial for an attacker to exploit, because they'll take advantage of those vulnerabilities. They'll install malware and they'll work their way up to deploying ransomware throughout your entire organization. So scanning and addressing those public-facing systems is key.
That's great. I'm just going to add in a point here as for Cybersecurity Awareness Month as well, not to give too much away in terms of the storyline that the province has rolled out to raise awareness for this month, is an incident around ransomware. So in terms of best practices and for education materials that you can use for yourself or for your organization, you can definitely tap onto cybersecurity.ontario.ca. We can see all the materials live as today. All right, I'll open it up to maybe Sam and Carolyn if there's anything to add on. If not, then I'll move on to our next question. I think we have time for about 2 more questions for today's segment. All right, so what are the most pressing cyber threat agencies, the most pressing cyber threats that agencies should be preparing for?
I can start that one, Julia. So I would say ransomware, which we just kind of spoke about in the last questions, is a big one. The other one's business email compromise. So that's another one where you really want to ensure that your email accounts are secured with multi-factor authentication, and you've got an education campaign around phishing. So attackers will try and find any way they can to get the account credentials of your email users, because it's very easy for them to launch these attacks en masse across the planet, basically. And every time they take over one of those accounts, they generally just use it to continue to perpetuate additional spam and phishing. So like you'll see gift card spam, credential spam. So business email account compromise is the other really big one.
Great. Thanks, David. All right, on to our last question for today. I know some students, high school or university level, that are interested in a career in cybersecurity. Do you have a recommendation or collection of learning materials that might provide some guidance to students interested in a career in cybersecurity? Something like a collection of links or recommended training. We'll pass this one. This looks like a more of a Carolyn question. I'll pass it over to you.
Sure. Thanks for that great question. And love the idea and opportunity for more students to get involved in this area, this industry. We do have a lot of existing universities and colleges from a higher ed perspective that are actually providing courses today. Really encourage you to check out some of the sites at these establishments and just have a look at the courses. I also am aware of some other areas by way of online training, education, and awareness. So I think what I might suggest is most students are pretty proficient in searching online, but certainly if you have the opportunity to access some of the Ontario.ca sites, there's lots of great information there. And certainly from an expert panel perspective, we'll also be sharing information in this area as well. So really encourage you to do a little bit of research, and if you have the inclination, get involved.
For sure, and from the Ontario perspective, the Ontario government, definitely the work is underway for our cyber youth strategy of making sure that we bridge the gap in terms of the cybersecurity talent, to encourage students to pursue a career in cybersecurity. If you're not convinced yet from our talk today, of a sneak peek of the daily lives of our panel members today, then I encourage you guys, to whoever is interested in, to please connect in with the cybersecurity team here through cybersecurity.ontario.ca, where we do have internship and co-op opportunities for students to get their foot in the door to work with cyber experts at the cybersecurity division. All right. On that note there, I'd like to maybe note that might be helpful for folks who are at the high school, university, or looking into a career in cybersecurity. The province is actually rolling out an event in November, but I don't want to give too much away. That's going to be on our next segment of Let's Talk Cyber. I see that there's no more questions rolling in at this point, and I think our time is up. It is now almost noon. So I want to thank our viewers very much, and of course to our special guests today, David, Sam, and Carolyn, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us on how we build cyber resilience at the start of Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody, and see you at the next segment.